When atheist Ellen DeGeneres humiliated Denzel Washington's faith on live TV, she thought it'd get laughs. But what Denzel said next left her and the audience in shock. The music was loud, bright, the kind that bounced off the studio walls and made you feel like something big was about to happen. The Ellen DeGeneres Show set shimmered under stage lights, that familiar white couch sitting perfectly across from the host's iconic chair. The crowd was already on their feet, clapping, cheering, some even whistling as Ellen danced out from behind the curtain, beaming like she owned the world. Because in this moment, she did. She took her seat, waving as the applause slowly faded. Okay, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You're not clapping for me today. You're clapping for our next guest. A short beat. Then the screens behind her lit up with a name everyone knew, Denzel Washington. The audience roared as Denzel stepped out, looking sharp in a black tailored jacket, subtle smile on his face. He moved with that easy confidence he always carried, the kind that made even a short walk across a stage feel like a movie entrance. He hugged Ellen, waved to the crowd, then sat down. Denzel Washington, Ellen said, drawing out the name with that grin of hers. I can't believe I finally got you here. I had to bribe half of Hollywood just to make this happen. Denzel chuckled. I had to check your credentials first. The audience laughed. The energy was warm, fun, typical Ellen. But beneath the surface, there was something else, a spark, maybe curiosity, maybe mischief. Ellen leaned in, her smile widening. So, you're here to talk about your new film, but we're also going to talk about you, because you are way more interesting than any movie. Denzel nodded, patient. Let's talk. And with that, the tone was set. Friendly, sure, but there was a flicker in Ellen's eyes, something a little sharper than her usual charm. This wasn't going to be just jokes and light questions. Not tonight. The audience was loving it, soaking in the chemistry, the comfort, the tension they couldn't quite name yet. They had no idea what was coming. The conversation started the way Ellen's conversations always did, with laughter. You're too calm, she said, shaking her head as the audience laughed along. You've played cops, villains, soldiers, kings, and yet you sit here like you just came from a meditation retreat. Denzel smiled, hands resting casually in his lap. Maybe I did. That got a good chuckle from the crowd. Ellen wasn't done. You know, people always say you're intense, like intimidating intense. Are you ever just goofy? Denzel laughed softly. Ask my wife. The audience erupted. It was easy, familiar, Hollywood royalty sitting with daytime TV's queen of casual. But then Ellen shifted, leaning forward just slightly, her tone still light, but her eyes twinkling with something sharper. You must pray before brushing your teeth, right? The joke hit like a feather at first, soft, silly. The audience laughed, unsure if it was okay to laugh harder. Denzel didn't flinch. Sometimes before, sometimes after, he said with a straight face, then cracked a smile. Laughter followed, but it was mixed now, some louder than others, some just watching. Ellen grinned, satisfied with the moment. I mean, I love that about you. You're so serious about your faith. Like, I read somewhere you said God told you to be an actor. Is that true? She said it casually, almost too casually. Denzel's smile remained, but his eyes narrowed just slightly, not offended, just present. Something like that, he said. Or maybe I was finally quiet enough to hear what had already been said. That line hung in the air. The audience went quiet for half a second, long enough to feel it. Then Ellen shifted again, laughing, deflecting, moving the energy back up. See? That's what I mean. You talk like a prophet, Denzel. You sure you don't want to start a church? More laughter. But now the tone was different. Still friendly, but there was an edge creeping in, a sense that Ellen wasn't just teasing, she was testing. Denzel just sat there, easy as ever. Calm, steady, like he'd heard this before, because he had. and he knew exactly where it was going. Ellen crossed her legs and leaned back, cue cards resting in her lap, but untouched. The crowd was still warm, still laughing, but the tone had started to shift, almost too slowly to notice. The kind of shift you feel more than hear. "So," she said, flashing her trademark grin, "let's talk about something a little deeper. You've said before that you believe God told you to become an actor, right?" Denzel nodded, no hesitation. "I did." Ellen tilted her head, smile still bright, but her tone turning pointed, casual, in that way that carried weight. "You know I love you," she said, her voice light but purposeful. "But don't you think it's a little outdated to say God told you to be an actor? Like, were the heavens casting you directly?" The audience chuckled, not the whole room, just pockets. That uncomfortable kind of laughter that isn't sure if it's supposed to be funny. Some faces smiled, others didn't move. Denzel didn't blink. He just watched her. "I mean," Ellen continued, waving her hand in mock dramatics, "I talk to my plants and my dogs, but I don't pretend they're handing me career advice." That landed. Another burst of laughter, this one louder, a few claps. But still, something was off. The crowd was enjoying the show, but there was a tension now, soft but rising, like a note that holds too long without resolution. Denzel smiled, unshaken, calm. Ellen leaned in again, sensing the tightrope beneath her. "Come on," she said, voice playful but pressing. "You're a smart guy. Harvard speeches, Oscar speeches, and then you say God whispered, 'Go act.'" The question sat there, weighty beneath the joke. Somewhere in the third row, a woman folded her arms. A man 2 seats over just stared straight ahead, brow furrowed. Ellen wasn't angry. She wasn't even rude. But the air in the studio had shifted. This wasn't banter anymore. It was a challenge. And Denzel, cool, composed, completely unfazed, wasn't going to play defense. He was about to play truth. Denzel's smile didn't waver. He let the room breathe for a second, eyes scanning the audience, then back to Ellen. His voice was low, steady, the kind that didn't try to talk over noise, just cut through it. "It's not about being outdated, Ellen," he said. "It's about listening to something bigger than yourself." That one sentence shifted the mood again. The audience quieted, like they were leaning in without realizing it. Denzel sat forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. Not defensive, just grounded. "We all hear voices," he continued. "Some people call it instinct. Others call it the universe. For me, it's God." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. "I wasn't always listening. I had to learn how to be still, how to shut out the noise, the doubt, the ego, and in that stillness, I found direction." The crowd was quiet now, not awkward quiet, respectful, present. Even Ellen, who had started this exchange with a smirk, was watching him with something closer to curiosity. "It's not superstition," he added, his voice smooth, calm. "It's not some magic trick. Faith's not a performance. It's a foundation." He paused, let it sit. "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, I've had success, and I've fallen on my face. But through it all, what kept me from breaking wasn't Hollywood. It wasn't talent. It was knowing there was something greater than me, something steady when everything else shook." A soft murmur ran through the crowd. Ellen blinked slowly. "Okay," she said, voice softer than before. "That was deep." Denzel leaned back, smiling again, but this time with a quiet finality. "You asked." And the room, which had moments ago laughed at the idea of divine guidance, now sat in a silence that felt more like reverence. It wasn't a sermon, it wasn't a lecture. It was a man speaking from the center of who he was. And for a moment, even on Ellen's stage, faith had the floor. Ellen let out a light laugh, but it didn't have the same punch as before. There was something underneath it now, something more deliberate. The crowd was still with her, but less certain than they had been minutes ago. She adjusted her posture, eyes fixed on Denzel, like she was lining up her next shot. "But you're a smart guy, Denzel," she said, the words dressed in a grin, but carrying a sharper edge. "I mean, believing in something invisible? You know how that sounds, right?" A flicker, a breath, then stillness. The audience caught it too. The laugh didn't come, not right away. A few people smiled nervously, a couple chuckled, but it was scattered now. Thinner. Ellen pressed forward, voice still light, but the rhythm had changed. "You're educated, respected. You speak at universities. You've played Malcolm X, for crying out loud. And then you turn around and say, 'God told me.' Doesn't that feel, I don't know, a little contradictory?" It was a challenge masked as curiosity, dressed in denim and delivered with that familiar Ellen charm. But everyone in the room could feel what it really was, a test. Denzel didn't move, didn't blink. His face remained calm, unreadable. He didn't reach for the mic, didn't jump in to defend. And somehow, that made the moment louder. The camera cut to a woman in the audience, her brows pinched, lips pressed tight. Another man rubbed the back of his neck, shifting in his seat. Ellen laughed again, filling the silence. "Hey, I'm just saying what half the people at home are thinking. It's not personal." But the room wasn't laughing with her this time, because something had shifted, and not in her favor. Denzel wasn't offended. He wasn't rattled. He just wasn't giving her what she was used to. He was giving her something else entirely. And Ellen, always so quick with the next joke, the next word, the next angle, suddenly seemed like she was trying to get her footing on ground that wasn't quite hers anymore. The silence didn't just settle. It expanded. Denzel didn't smile, didn't speak. He just looked at her, not with judgment, not with anger, just with a presence that filled the air like gravity, heavy, still. The kind of pause that wasn't empty, it was intentional. Ellen shifted slightly in her seat. Nothing dramatic. Just a subtle movement, like someone adjusting when the temperature changes, and they can't quite explain why they're uncomfortable. She tilted her head, still trying to keep it light, but the edge of her grin softened. This wasn't going how she thought it would. The crowd felt it too. Phones stopped recording. Nobody dared whisper. All eyes were on Denzel, waiting. Not because they expected a punchline, but because they could tell he wasn't going to give one. He was choosing something else. The camera zoomed in just enough to catch the change in his expression. Still calm, still composed, but focused now. Like he wasn't answering Ellen anymore, he was addressing the moment itself. One beat, then another. The kind of silence that demanded you lean in. Ellen cleared her throat softly. "You okay?" she said, trying to break the tension with a half laugh. Denzel finally moved. He leaned forward just slightly, hands clasped together, not clenched, just steady. "I'm just thinking about the weight of your question," he said. His voice was low, measured, but every word felt carved out of something real. Ellen blinked. There was no comeback, no clever turn, just stillness and truth. Waiting. And the audience. They weren't watching a talk show anymore. They were watching something else, something you don't get from sound bites, something real. Denzel sat still for a moment longer. The room was his now, not because he demanded it, but because he'd earned it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform. He just began to speak. Quiet. Real. "You know, when I was younger," he said, "I didn't have it all figured out. Far from it." The audience listened, leaned in. "I was 20, maybe 21. Kinda drifting. I had talent, yeah, but no direction. No discipline. I was messing around, wasting time. Thought I had it all under control." He paused, then added, "I didn't." Soft laughter flickered through the crowd, the kind that comes from recognition, not amusement. One day I was sitting in my mom's beauty shop. This old woman, never seen her before in my life, walked in off the street, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Young man, you're going to speak to millions. You're going to travel the world, and you're going to do it for God's glory." He let that land. No one moved. At the time I laughed, thought it was weird, Maybe she was confused, but I couldn't shake it. His voice stayed steady, his eyes focused, but warm. From that moment on, something started changing, slowly, quietly. I started paying attention, started cleaning up. I went to school, I worked hard, I started praying. Not to be famous, not to be rich, but for clarity, for purpose. He took a breath. And that changed everything. There was no applause, not yet. The room was too still, too full. "This isn't about religion," he said. "It's about direction, about knowing there's more to life than your ego, that you're here to serve something bigger than yourself." He leaned back slightly. "That woman never came back. Nobody knew who she was, but I remember every word. And whether you believe in prophecy or coincidence, I'll tell you this, it made me better." The silence said it all. He wasn't trying to convert anyone. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just telling the truth. And everyone in that room felt it. Something had changed, not just in Denzel's voice, not just in the story, but in the room. The audience, once buzzing with excitement and eager laughter, now sat almost reverent. Not stiff, not uncomfortable, just listening, fully. A woman in the second row wiped her eye with a tissue. A man in the back, arms once folded, now sat forward, elbows on knees. Even the studio crew, so used to background noise and scripted beats, stood still, cameras locked, breath quiet. And Ellen? She was smiling, still playing host. But there was something in her eyes now. Something not quite guarded, but uncertain. She shifted in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her legs, like the ground beneath her had moved just slightly, not in a bad way, just unexpected. She wasn't used to this, not like this. She cleared her throat, glanced at her cue cards, then set them aside. It was clear now, whatever she had planned for this segment had just gone out the window. "This is," she started, then stopped. "Okay, that was, wow." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't sarcasm. It was real. Denzel nodded, not gloating, just present. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't flexing his story like a badge. He was just letting it sit there, like a truth too simple to argue with. "This isn't about being right," he said gently. "It's about being real. And for me, faith is real. It gives me focus. It gives me peace. In a world that's loud and chaotic, it keeps me centered." The crowd exhaled like they hadn't realized they'd been holding their breath. Ellen gave a small, uncertain chuckle, not dismissive, just human. "Okay, I wasn't expecting that today." Denzel smiled, soft. "Neither was I." And with that, the energy of the studio transformed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something closer to a shared experience, a moment of connection. Not everyone believed what Denzel believed, but in that moment, everyone believed him. And that was enough. Ellen let the silence linger just a beat longer than usual, an instinctive pause, maybe respect, maybe regrouping. Then she did what she does best. She smiled wide, leaned back into her chair, and let out a half laugh. "Okay," she said, glancing toward the audience. "Now I feel like I need to pray, and I don't even know how." The crowd laughed, but this time it was different, softer. Not the kind of burst you hear after a punchline, but the warm kind, the kind that says, "We're still with you." Ellen grinned, but it wasn't quite her usual playful smugness. There was humility tucked underneath it now, just a flicker. Denzel chuckled, leaning in, voice low but kind. "You don't need to know how," he said. "Just be still." The room stilled again, not tense, not frozen, just still. Like everyone suddenly understood what he meant, even if they hadn't before. Ellen blinked, her smile softening. "That's good," she said quietly. "That's really good." She looked down at her cards, then pushed them further away. "You're messing up my whole show, you know that?" The crowd laughed again, bigger this time, lighter, but they were still riding the wave Denzel had brought into the room. "I mean," she added, gesturing toward him, You come in here with your calm voice and your movie star smile, and now you've got me rethinking my whole worldview. What is happening?" Denzel laughed. "Easy. I'm just sharing what's real for me." And somehow, that was enough. The tension that had once flickered between them had melted into something closer to understanding. There were still differences, different beliefs, different worldviews, but right now, that wasn't the point. Because for the first time, the show wasn't about winning the room, it was about holding it. And Denzel, he was doing just that, with nothing but presence and truth. The conversation turned, not by force, not by cue card, but by rhythm, Denzel's rhythm. "So what keeps you grounded?" Ellen asked, genuinely now. The sharpness in her tone was gone, replaced with curiosity, not performance, just wondering. Denzel didn't hesitate. "Service," he said. "That's what keeps me in check." He leaned forward, voice smooth but firm. "I work with young men in the inner city, kids who've been written off, passed over. I talk to them about discipline, about purpose, about knowing their worth." The crowd was quiet again, but not stiff, just listening. "I visit prisons," he continued, "not for show, not for headlines, just to sit, talk, listen. Remind people they're more than the worst thing they've ever done." He paused, looked out across the audience. "Because if faith doesn't move you to do something, it's just noise." That line hit hard. Even Ellen nodded, eyes a little wider now. "Faith without action is just noise," she repeated softly. "That's powerful." Denzel shrugged, humble. "It's real, that's all." The audience was still, not out of politeness, out of respect. You could feel it. There was no applause cue, no flashy moment, just a room full of people absorbing something that didn't need to be dressed up. Ellen sat back, letting the words settle. "You ever think about being a preacher?" she asked, half joking but not entirely. Denzel smiled. "I'm just an actor with a calling. The message is what matters." And in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't about celebrity. This wasn't about belief versus disbelief. It was about impact. And Denzel had just made his. For a moment, Ellen didn't say anything. She just sat there, fingers curled lightly around the armrest, eyes a little less bright, a little more real. The usual rhythm of her show, laugh, pivot, deliver, was gone. What filled its place was quieter, slower. She started, then paused, not for drama, just to find the right words. "You know," she said finally, looking not at Denzel but out toward the audience, "a few years ago, I lost someone close to me." The room stilled again. "It wasn't public. I kept it private. But it shook me more than I expected. I kept showing up here, dancing, smiling. But inside, I didn't really know what to do with the weight of it." She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. But her voice dropped just slightly, enough to let the truth come through. "I'd go home, sit in silence and think, what's the point of all this if the people we love just disappear?" She laughed once, dry, shaking her head. "I'm not saying I started praying or anything, but I started wondering." Denzel didn't move, didn't speak. He just listened, fully. "I guess what I'm saying is," Ellen continued, "sometimes I envy people who believe in something that steady, who can lose someone and still feel held, who wake up in the chaos and feel like there's a reason to keep walking." She met his eyes then, and for once, there was no wall between them, just a window. "I don't have that. Not yet anyway." The audience didn't clap. They didn't need to. What just happened didn't need noise. It needed stillness. And in that stillness, Ellen DeGeneres, talk show legend, queen of cool, had let something honest come through. Not an admission of faith, but an opening. Denzel leaned forward again, but this time he wasn't responding to a comment. He was answering a moment. "You don't need to share my belief," he said gently, "to share my hope." That one line dropped into the room like a pebble in still water, soft but wide-reaching. He wasn't trying to convert her. He wasn't correcting her. He was meeting her right where she was. "We've all got something we lean on," he continued. "For me, it's God. For someone else, it might be love, or family, or just the belief that tomorrow matters." He smiled, quiet. "Whatever it is, if it helps you stand, if it helps you keep showing up, then it's doing its job." Ellen nodded, her eyes softer now, less guarded. "That's the first time I've heard it put that way," she admitted. "It's not always about agreement," Denzel said. "Sometimes it's just about respect." The two of them sat there, no longer a host and a guest, no longer two opposing viewpoints, but two people who had seen each other. The audience felt it. You could see it in their faces, heads tilted, eyes focused. That invisible thread that runs through all human connection had pulled a little tighter. Ellen leaned back, let out a slow breath. "This is not the interview I thought we were going to have." Denzel smiled. "Me neither." And for the first time, it wasn't about being clever or charismatic or even correct. It was about being present. Two worldviews, one conversation, and in that space, something better than agreement had formed. Understanding. Denzel looked away from Ellen and turned toward the audience. Not dramatically, not to perform, just to speak, man to people, human to human. His voice was soft but clear, like a note held steady on a quiet piano. "You don't have to believe in what I believe," he said, his hands resting open on his lap. "That's not the point." He paused, just long enough for it to settle. "But you've got to believe in something greater than your ego." That line landed like a thunderclap in a quiet church. No fire, no brimstone, just truth. "You've got to believe that life is more than your next check, your next follower count, your next applause," he said. "Because if you're only building for yourself, it's going to collapse under the weight of your own name." The room was frozen, no fidgeting, no coughing, just air and ears. "And look," he added, "I've played kings, I've played warriors, I've stood on stages with awards in both hands. None of that filled me like purpose did, none of it." He leaned back, voice slowing, but never losing strength. "So whether you pray or meditate or sit in silence at the end of a hard day, find that place, find that anchor, because without it, this world will shake you." And then he smiled, not a Hollywood smile, a real one, the kind that comes from peace. And that's when it happened. The audience stood, not all at once, but wave by wave, like a slow tide. The applause started in the middle, then the front row, then the back, hands clapping, some with tears in their eyes, others just nodding, moved by something they didn't expect to feel on a weekday afternoon. It wasn't for the actor, it was for the moment. And Denzel? He just nodded once, humbly, like he knew this wasn't about him. It never was. The segment ended. Ellen gave her usual sign-off, the camera pulled back, the theme music kicked in, but the real show wasn't over, not even close. Before the credits had finished rolling, the internet was already on fire. Clips of Denzel's words flooded Twitter. TikTok stitched together the moment Ellen asked if he really believed God whispered in his ear, and the calm, commanding way he answered. "Denzel just turned a mockery into a masterclass in grace," one tweet read, racking up likes by the second. "Ellen got real, and people loved it," another said, followed by, "More of this. Please, more real." Hashtags like faith and respect, Denzel unshaken, and Ellen listened began trending within the hour. People weren't just watching, they were talking. YouTube thumbnails popped up like wildfire. Denzel Washington shuts down, Ellen with 7 words. When a Hollywood legend speaks about God, this is how you handle disrespect with class. Comment sections filled with stories, viewers sharing how they'd grown up in faith, drifted from it, questioned it. Others didn't believe it all, but said they respected Denzel's poise, his composure, his refusal to retaliate with anger. Even skeptics chimed in, "I don't believe in God, but that man made me feel something." Didn't expect to cry watching Ellen, but here we are. The moment had crossed every line the internet usually draws: politics, faith, race, ideology, and somehow, for a few hours, it wasn't about division. It was about dignity. And somewhere, in the middle of all the buzz, one message stood out above the noise. This is how we need to talk to each other. Because grace, when done right, doesn't shout. It resonates. The applause faded slowly like a tide retreating from shore. The studio lights dimmed just a touch, casting a warmer glow over the set. Ellen adjusted her posture in the chair, her usual bounce muted now. Not gone, just grounded. She looked at Denzel, really looked at him. Not as the guest, not as the believer, not even as the Oscar winner. Just as a man who had come here, told the truth, and left something lasting in the room. "I've got to say," she began, her voice softer than it had been all show, "this conversation didn't go where I thought it would." Laughter rippled through the audience, gentle, knowing. Ellen smiled. "And I mean that in the best way." She paused, letting her gaze settle on him again. "I don't believe in God," she said clearly. No performance in her tone, just honesty. "But I believe in people like you." The crowd didn't clap. Not yet. They were waiting for him. Denzel's smile came slow and easy. He leaned in, gave a single, calm nod. "That's a start," he said. And with those 3 words, the room exhaled. The studio lights held steady, the energy mellow but full. Ellen turned back to the camera, her closing line ready, but this time, it wasn't just a send-off. It was an invitation. On screen, the camera slowly zoomed out. Her voice came through, "Have you ever had your perspective shifted by someone who listened instead of shouted? Let's talk." The screen began to fade to black, music swelling just enough to feel it in your chest. Then the final text appeared, white, simple, still. Like, comment, subscribe, and never stop asking bigger questions. Fade out, end of show. But for everyone watching, something real had just started. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.